Hello, Bart.
Hi Alex, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good as well. Can you see me okay?
Yes, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, good to see you. Excited for this?
Yes, I think it's a very interesting topic talking about money, particularly after what happened last year with many jobs, the economy.
Definitely.
So I think you know a lot also about
Yeah,
that because in the UK in particular, they have been very strict with lockdowns and things have changed.
yeah, definitely. I know many people who lost their jobs, businesses that have gone under, and yeah, it just makes me realize how important it is to have your financial house in order. So it's great that we can share some tips, what we know to help people get out of this difficult and challenging time.
Yeah. And I think a good place to start is to talk about ourselves first, a brief introduction, because some people don't know me in your community and some people
Mhm.
don't know you in mine. So, would you like to start sharing briefly what you do?
Sure. So I'm Bartmi Lutz. I'm a qualified accountant and teacher. Currently, I live in London. So whilst I'm a qualified accountant, I also help people to create a life and a career that they love, focusing on career, mindset, and personal finance. I'm also a global citizen. Can you see my shirt or not?
Oh, yes, I can see.
Yeah.
You
So
have
I
traveled a
spent
lot.
yeah, yeah. Like I was born in the Netherlands. I moved to Australia when I was 18 years old. Lived there for 7 years. Lived in Thailand for 6 years, and now in the UK. So I'm a global citizen.
Oh, perfect.
How about you?
I am Alex Perez, although in English people say Perez.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Sydney, Australia. I'm an engineer, but I currently dedicate my life to facilitating change and transformation for people who want to dedicate their lives to something more meaningful and purposeful and inspiring. So I facilitate that process with people, one-on-one or groups. And I am a global citizen too. I've traveled a lot, although I've only lived in two countries. So Venezuela was my first one, and now Australia, for now, is the second
Mm-hmm.
one.
Yeah.
And I have been working with the transformation of people in the last 3 years and doing one-on-one coaching and group training. And I love doing that. And I find also that part of the empowerment that we need to have as human beings in many areas of life, one of them is definitely money and finances.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought of having a conversation here about some tips and tactics about money that have been very helpful for you, maybe from last year in particular, to that we can use for
Mm-hmm.
next or this current year,
Yeah.
or in general something that you already were doing, and
Mm-hmm.
that when we went through the pandemic, you realized that that paid off, and it was a great decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like to start sharing your first topic or tactic for whoever is
Uh,
listening?
sure, sure. So the first tip that I have for you guys is to get out of an entitlement mindset.
Mm,
So the coronavirus crisis really created this entitlement mindset, like, okay, my business is going down, so the government has to rescue me and support me. Um, I actually didn't learn this strategy during Corona, but I learned this when I was 18 years old and I was studying at university in Sydney, Australia, where you are living right now.
yeah.
And I was an international student, so I had many classmates from China, Indonesia, Thailand, like all these Asian countries. And 99.99% of all these students who paid for their education, it was their parents. So they had this entitlement mindset, like, I'm rich, I can just study, and my parents will just pay the rent, they pay my food, they pay my studies, my educational fees, my books. And as a result, they had this entitlement mindset. And I remember I called my dad one night and I asked, Dad, why don't you pay for my studies? Like all of my classmates, their parents are paying it. Why aren't you paying for it?
Of
And he
course.
said, well, I'm not going to do that. It's your responsibility to pay for that. It was your choice, your responsibility to do so. And at first, I was really, really angry with my dad, honestly. Like, how could you do that? You're so selfish. Like, you should look after me. That's the definition of selfishness, right? By wanting other people to look after you rather than you looking after yourself.
Yes.
But it's really got me thinking, like, okay, no one is going to rescue me. No one is going to pay for my studies. Like, I'm in charge. I have to do it. So it made me more creative. It made me expand my horizons. I got 2 full-time jobs, one in the evening in a restaurant, and one on the weekend in another restaurant. I was subleasing my apartments. I was making money on eBay. So I had all these different income streams that eventually paid
Mm,
for my studies and more.
wow.
Yeah, so it's really important not to feel entitled because you are entitled to nothing. Get out of that entitlement mentality. And it's hard to do because once you are entitled, once you receive that easy money without doing anything for it, you may think, oh, that's the way to be. I can be lazy. I don't have to do anything. But you become dependent on that income stream or whoever is supporting you or entitling you to something. So yeah,
Yes.
that's my first tip. Don't have that mentality, entitlement mindset.
Okay. Well, I'm going to share my first one
Sure.
that I believe is more of a tip than a tactic. So, and this is about having savings, but this is not just having savings. I think it's important to have a measure of savings. And for me, what happened was that I had 3 months of living expenses in savings, and I was working in a project until this year, and they went through financial struggle, as many companies did in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and the project couldn't continue, so we all had to finish the project. But what I did was, instead of, I was saving a lot of money for investments, and I was investing a lot of money in the share market. But then instead of putting more money into the share market, I started to save more money to keep myself in the case of losing this opportunity with this project. So I raised my savings to more than 6 months of living expenses, and I was prepared. So I thought, if I lose this opportunity, if I don't have more this income from this project, I will not be concerned, I will not be stressed, and I won't be reacting because I am prepared. So my tip there is to have more than 6 months of expenses saved in an account. I don't call that account emergency account because I think that maybe I can attract emergencies. I
Yeah.
call it always prepared. That's the
Yeah.
name of my account. And it's there to give me peace of mind because I know that for some people, maybe they don't see the purpose of having that money there. They could be making money with that in the share market or
Mm-hmm.
some other form. But I think that peace of mind is something that we cannot quantify, but it's very, very important. It's a very intangible benefit of having savings. And then that also helps me with something that is I find important, that this is a concept of dealing with my future self. That if I know that I am going to be stressed at the end of my money, if I have only 3 months of savings, if I lose my job, my project, my business, and in 3 months I have no money, I'm going to be stressed. And the mindset and the way I'm going to be making decisions in that stress stage or state is going to be very different from the state and stage that I can be doing decisions right now when I'm not stressed about money. So I am dealing with my future self right now when I am more centered and objective, and then I can deal with when I have, if I lost an opportunity, a job or a business, in the future, I am more prepared and I'm making different decisions. And it is also helpful for people who want to change careers. If people want to change careers, which is something that happened a lot last year too, if you have savings and you have money in your bank account, you can it's easier, maybe not easy, but it's easier to make changes of career if you want to finish a job and then you can go to something different, try something new. If you have saving, it's easier than having to be on the limit of your savings and then wanting to attract clients or business or a new job based on desperation. So that's my number one. What's your
That's a
next one?
great tip. And just to continue on that, what, where do you keep that 6 months of capital? Do you just put it in a bank account or how?
Yes, I put it in a bank account that gives me the highest interest rate
Mhm.
that I can get at the moment
Yeah.
in Australia. And I cannot easily access that account, but it gives me still liquidity.
Yeah, and just to confirm with people, like the purpose is not to earn interest, right? The purpose is really to make sure you are centered and future focused.
Yeah,
Yeah, perfect. Love that. Okay, my second tip is that you must make a profit every month, and the way to do that is to structure your life as a business.
mm,
So a business must make a profit. Why? Because if you don't make a profit, you have to borrow money in order for the business to continue. And in your life, if you don't make a profit, you have to get in debt. You have to borrow money. And if you borrow more than you can handle, you have to pay interest on that borrowings. So it's really important that you live a profit. And this is not just the case with money, but it's also with energy. Like make sure that you invest in things that give you energy, that make a profit for you rather than just throwing it away. So it's a
mm,
little bit of a short tip, but make sure that you make a profit every month. And an easy way to start is just very simple. Write down your income and your expenses and make sure that your income is higher than your expenses. If your expenses are higher than your income, the first thing that you can do is to minimalize your lifestyle. But yeah, many personal finance books talk about that. But just get into this mindset of structuring your life as a business and to make a profit every month.
I like that. And I'll touch on that
Mhm.
in another point. But the next one I want to mention first is having money conversations with your domestic partner. If you live with
Mhm.
your partner or spouse and you have some common expenses, I think it's very important. This is something that I was practicing already with my partner. But last year, when we saw that we could both lose our jobs and we didn't know when, we were working in different industries, but still we didn't know what was going to happen. And we had to have a more open and detailed conversation about money. And we even scheduled that meeting in our calendars. And I put like a formal meeting. So let's sit down with no distractions, no mobile phones, and let's talk about money. So how much do you have? How much do I have? How much is that going to last? What are we going to do if we lose our jobs? If we lose any other income that we have? So what are we going to do? So from last year, I learned that lesson that it's very important to have that open and honest conversation because you might have expenses, common expenses that the other person might not be able to afford. So I think it's very helpful in relationships in particular to prevent disagreements, misunderstandings, just to have that open conversation. Because I know for some people, maybe they can feel proud or ashamed of not having enough money to pay for their expenses. But that's not going to lead to resolving the issue. So that's my tip for this.
That's a great tip. And when you grew up, did you see your parents do the same thing or did they do the opposite? Was money kind of taboo in your family?
Taboo. They didn't really talk about money openly. It was a source of stress sometimes too.
Mhm.
So I decided that I wanted to live a different relationship in that
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great tip. Thank you. My next one is that you should not put all your eggs in one basket. So
Mm.
if you're an employee, having your job is actually really high risk, especially nowadays, like 20 years ago, there was no globalization. you would just compete with like local businesses. But nowadays, businesses compete with virtually everyone in the world, right? So if you have one job, one stream of income, it's really high risk. If something happens to the business, if like a competitor comes up and you lose your job, your income is gone. So it's
Yeah.
really important that you have multiple streams of income, multiple jobs even, so you disperse the risk rather than having just that one stream of income that you rely on for your livelihood. There are different kinds of income. So your job is just active income. You're basically, it's a bad word, but you're a prostitute. Like you exchange your body and your time for money.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you don't go to work, you don't get paid. That's simply it. So make sure that, when you do your 9 to 5 job, that you also work on creating different kinds of income. Um, and people may think like, oh, I need a lot of money to create more money. But nowadays, there's so many things that you can do to generate money. Like I have audio programs that I sell on iTunes that makes money every month. I have video courses that make money every month. I have investments just like you that pay dividends every month. So rather than having just one job and one stream of income, make sure that you really think creatively like, okay, how can I develop different streams of income? And you may need to sacrifice on your Netflix to build this in the evenings or on the weekends. Like, I know it can be tough, like, you worked hard all day, 9 to 5, and you come back home, but if money is really important for you, it might be really beneficial for you to think like, what income streams can I develop with the skills that I have? So you disperse the risk and yeah, have multiple streams of income coming in.
I think that's great, and it's important because if we think that we need to sacrifice or it's going to be stressful spending time on our weekends doing that, if we lose our jobs, it's going to be stressful too. Then we have only
Definitely.
one source, and we're gonna have to, like, if we liked watching TV on weekends and we don't want to be doing the effort of generating extra income.
Mhm.
Well, if we lose our jobs, we're going to have to dedicate the weekend and the whole week to finding the next job, particularly now. So it's
Exactly.
worth, again, dealing with future self now and not wait
Yeah.
for that to happen. And that's very linked to what I'm going to share next, which is
Mhm.
very simple and is equally important, but I know many people don't do it. And it's importance of tracking your expenses and knowing where your money is going, having a budget. So I have a Mr. Microsoft Excel. I love doing everything there. And I
Yeah.
track my expenses because there, when I do that, I can see where money is going and I can anticipate what I'm going to spend my money next month on. But I can also see if I'm in a difficult financial situation, I can see clearly where my money is going and where I can cut expenses. So, for example, if paying for Netflix is not essential, I can cut expenses there and I can see it. But maybe that's easy because it's just a regular fee, but maybe you can see how much you're spending on food, for example. So you can change and don't buy in one supermarket, you go to a different one, or change the list of products that you buy or the type, the quality, whatever. So when you have that, you can also project the whole year. This is what I do. I project my expenses for the whole year. And
Mhm.
then if a difficult financial situation comes, going back to the point, my point number one of having savings, I can easily divide how much I have in savings by my monthly expenses and see how much time I have of savings. But if
Mhm.
I don't have this in place, it's going to be stressful, and doing it under stress is going to be different.
Yeah.
So I recommend tracking expenses is really important because I know and I support the idea of increasing income, and finding many ways of increasing income is very important. But you're going to accelerate your results if you can also decrease unnecessary expenses where you can, and if it's not really essential, particularly when there's a pandemic, for example. Some people may consider cutting expenses on things that are not essential and then Maybe they don't want to have a coffee every day. They
Mhm.
stop it for 6 months, or they
Mhm.
cut their Netflix, or they cut public transport, they walk. So different things
Yeah.
that you can monitor and track easier if you are doing that on any form of, well, I do it on Excel. Some people use apps. Some people do it on paper. It depends on what
Yeah.
works for people. Do you do, I'm sure you do it, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do you do any of that yourself?
Yeah, I actually use Quicken. So
Okay.
Quicken, you basically type in what you spend, what your income is, and it even categorizes it like food, going out, restaurants, health and fitness. You can create your own categories. So every month I just see like a really clear and neat overview of my finances.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And I think also that helps you to, in a way, for me at least, it helps me to be grateful for the things I already have. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking of, well, I'm going to have to cut money on this and this and that, but I still have money to pay for my rent or my mortgage, I still have money to pay for my food. It's a reality check on things that we can be grateful for.
Definitely. And yeah, thanks for that tip. And I think it links to my next one, which is money is a triple-edged sword.
Mm.
So when I was younger, my classmates, they would go party on the weekend. They wouldn't do any work. And if you party, you spend money, right? So they would spend like 100 euros or wherever you are, $100 on a weekend, on a night even, on beer and drinks. And that wouldn't work, so there's no income. But then if you replace that with actually working, so let's say, person A, they go out, they spend $100, but person B, they don't go out and they earn $100 because they work. So you have step one, you save $100 because you don't spend it. Step two, you earn $100, so the difference is $200. And then step three, because you have that money, you can invest it. And maybe, if you get 5% in dividends, you get 5% every year, which is another €5. So you have one, two, three, or even more steps of income. So
Mm.
yeah, money is a triple-edged sword, or even more than that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had a conversation years ago with a person here in Australia. He
Mm-hmm.
was very young and he was into party mode and partying often.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we were talking about housing, and he said that he was renting a room. I think he was a student. He was working in yes, he was working in a bar or a cafe. And he said to me that he was living in a room because he couldn't afford to live on his own, by his own, paying the full place, like a one bedroom place for himself. And I asked him, how often do you party? Usually Fridays, every Friday.
Yeah.
And roughly how much do you spend? And he would say like $200. He could
Wow.
spend $200 every night. If you
Yeah.
multiply that 4 times, that's $800.
Yeah.
So that is money that you could use to, let's say not 500, maybe you can take only 500 from that
Mm-hmm.
and still spend 300 on entertainment.
Yeah.
That could have given him a bigger place to live, well, in the
Mm-hmm.
city where he was living in particular. So he
Yeah.
did have ways to save money, but he was choosing to party instead.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it's right or wrong to party. That's a personal
Mm-hmm.
choice.
Yeah. Been there,
But
done that.
yes, but I think it's a choice that we're making. It's not necessarily that things are happening to us or the economy is this way or rents are very expensive. There is also one side of that is our personal power of making decisions and choices on how we spend money.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about that, I thought of that story.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a next point here, which you already touched on, that is debt, consumer debt in particular. So I used to be a person of debt. I was in debt very often. And when I lived in Venezuela, I was in debt because I wanted to buy shoes and shirts. I was younger than now, of course. And I didn't care if I didn't have the money because I had credit cards and I could buy that. I also loved traveling, so I was traveling a lot. Then I moved to Australia. Also, the inflation there is very high and people tend to be in debt because they pay a lot of things with credit card. So that was my justification there. But then I moved to Australia and I was in debt again. And I was buying courses and training programs, some of which you have done yourself.
Yes.
And I was spending money on trips. I was traveling too. And I wasn't earning, in my perception, I wasn't earning enough to travel as much as I wanted. So I was using credit card. And my goals in January used to be paying off my debt. And that is not a very inspiring goal to myself. I didn't want it to be that to be my main objective and achievement of the year, just paying debt. So I had this realization a couple of years ago when I decided that I was not going to be in debt anymore because I had already traveled a lot, which I still want to continue doing, but it's not necessarily that way of traveling that I want to do. And I had done enough courses and I love studying and learning, but I don't have to be in debt for that. I can save for them and
Yeah.
wait until I have the money for that. So that's when I decided to empower myself by reading a lot and investing in the share market and now earning money for my money and not only spending it. But last year in particular, I think if people were stressed about losing their jobs, losing their income, losing the business, if they were in debt, particularly in consumer debt, that makes the situation even more stressful. So I think it's important when I started the year, well, I didn't have any debt. I don't have any debt now. And I think about that's been a great decision that I made before the pandemic, because then during these volatile times of the economy, I'm not worried about having to pay for my credit card. But
Yeah.
also, if I needed it, I have all the credit available because I haven't spent any money on it. So that I would advise people to make a priority, a high priority to pay debt, consumer, like having savings and then paying consumer debt as quick as possible, and then starting to change habits on spending. And it's sometimes as simple as not spending money if you don't have it, period, because that's a very, very emotional decision. Well, pretty much every decision that we make about money tends to be emotional.
Mm.
So it's just to train our emotions and making different choices, because it's not about how much we make. It's really about our habits and what we do with the money we make.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great tip. And are you debt free at the moment, or you still have some outstanding debt?
What was your question?
Are you debt free at the moment, or you still have some debt?
I'm debt free,
Yeah. Good
zero
to.
debt. You
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, me too. Yeah, the only thing I ever borrowed was for the first semester to study. It's quite expensive as an international student, so I had to borrow 10,000 euros from my dad. But
And to
luckily,
study here?
yeah, that's correct. But
Expensive.
luckily at the time, 1 euro was $2. So I borrowed 10,000 euros, which is 20,000 Australian. But then years later, when I paid him back, um, 1 euro was less than $1.5. So now I only had to pay him back $15,000. So I made $5,000 profit on my loan, which was pretty cool. Yeah,
Wow. So you
yeah,
were destined to make money.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. My next tip is to make sure that you do more than you are being paid for. So in the previous generation, if you did a good job, you'll get a good paycheck. But nowadays, you can do a good job, but you get actually a poor paycheck because there's so much competition in business, in the workplace. So doing a good job is no longer good enough. Nowadays, you have to do a great job to get good pay. And if you want to have great pay, you must do an excellent job, or as Tony Robbins says, an outstanding job. So it may be hard because you're working so hard, you do the right thing, but you might not always be rewarded directly for the services that you provide. There's kind of a lag time between the service that you do and the rewards that come. And also, the rewards may not come from the same place. So, for example, a couple of years ago when I lived in Thailand, there was this cashier at Tesco. Like
Mm.
Tesco's like this big supermarket. And if you are a cashier, like what can you do? Like, hello, good afternoon. Like, and you just scan all the items. Okay, that's £10, please. Like, that's it, right? But she was enthusiastic. She was talking with people. She was helping to pack the groceries in the bag. Like, all of that she didn't have to do. So I thought, like, I want to hire this person because she's doing more than she's being paid for. So I went to Tesco the next day to hire her, and someone else already hired her away for a much better paying job. So
Wow.
even though it might seem like you're stuck at your job, like it's just like anyone else can do it, it's standardized like McDonald's, whatever. But if you give it more energy, you give more service, you do more than you are being paid for, eventually the profits will catch up. And you need to have faith that that's going to happen. But if you just do what's being asked of you, you will get poor pay because that's the way business is nowadays. You have to do more than you are being paid for.
And that is great because that's one way of increasing your income without spending money.
Definitely, definitely.
Do you have, I think you had, I'm not sure if it was you, I think it was you. Do you have a story about increasing income, giving more during the pandemic?
Yeah, that's correct. Like last year, I got 3 pay rises during the
Mm.
pandemic. And, I'm an accountant, so I still have my 9 to 5 job. Um, But yeah, I actually started 2 years ago when I moved to London. I started working in a restaurant because I couldn't find a job. I haven't lived in London before, and British companies are kind of hesitant to hire Europeans. But yeah, I got a job in a restaurant, then I got a job in an office, and I was severely underpaid. Like I was barely making minimum wage. But I was willing to start small and to do more than I was being paid for. So as a result, I was being able to do the work in our team more efficiently. And as a result, it's kind of bad, but one of my colleagues, he got fired because I could basically do his job as well. And part of uh, the money that we saved, I got as a pay rise. Um, yeah, and then later the same thing happened as well. The manager who wasn't producing, he left the company. And again, I got a promotion because I could do his task as well.
Wow.
So I didn't want those guys to be fired, but that's the way that business is. If you're not managing it effectively, someone else will. So it's really important that you do more than you are being asked to do. Like those people that got fired, like they didn't do more than they were doing. They weren't doing more that they were being asked to do. They were doing less than they were being paid for. So as a result, the higher management decided like, they aren't right for the company because
Yeah.
there's no fair exchange there. So it's really important for people to realize this, especially during the pandemic. Like, just go the extra mile and have the faith that the profit and the income will catch up with it. Even though now it's kind of flat, in the future it's going to catch up. And imagine you having worked so hard during the pandemic, and then afterwards, when the business catches up, your management will see like, wow, this guy went the extra mile, even when, we weren't in a position to give him a pay rise. And as a
Mm.
result, now they will give it to you.
And if they didn't acknowledge that, you could still now feel that you have more skills that you can offer to companies, other companies, for a higher
Hmm.
income or pay than that current company. So that's not wasted time
Yeah,
for
definitely.
sure.
Like in the worst case, they can give you a great testimonial or reference because you have gone the extra mile.
Mm. Yeah. So what I have next in my list is about being intentional with spending. Last year, because of the pandemic, a lot of people were being more conscious about spending money on what was necessary and what wasn't. But I think we don't need to wait for a pandemic to do that. We can be more intentional with our spending. And I started to do this practice of being more intentional about 2 years ago, three, I'm three now, of being more intentional and seeing how much that of spending money is going to give me from spending on whatever I'm spending on. And one example that is similar but not exactly the same thing is with alcohol consumption. I stopped drinking alcohol a couple of years ago because I was having some digestive issues. And then I realized also that the benefit that I was getting from not drinking alcohol was that I was saving money, because alcohol is money that I was spending before on. And now, because I didn't drink alcohol and I still don't, I don't spend money on that. And when you go out to restaurants with friends, your bill is lower because I had alcohol and you didn't. And I started to think, what purpose is spending on alcohol serving? Like drinking alcohol, is that serving any purpose? And I was explaining this to somebody a couple of months ago, and they told me, you sound very religious. That sounds like a religion, but I'm not religious and it's not a religion. But I find that if it's not serving any purpose, why am I doing it? Why am I drinking alcohol? Just to be social. I can be social without that. I don't really need that. So that was a benefit that I got from making that decision, that change of stopping spending money on alcohol. Even if I don't have to spend it myself, I just don't drink it anymore. But then with every other expense, I keep thinking the same. Do I really need to have this monthly membership on this thing? Do I really need it now? And again, I don't, and I was having a session with somebody recently, and we came to the conclusion that you don't necessarily have to spend the money on something just because you have it. And the pandemic was very good for us to have that lesson and realization that we don't need to wait until that happens to be more intentional. And I think it's then important to know, well, if I'm not spending money on alcohol and I'm saving money, what am I going to do with that? Because if you don't have a purpose for that, and you don't have plans for that money, that savings, even if it's just $10 per month, you're going to waste it on something else. And having plans for that is really important. I like investing in the share market. I like doing that for the long term, not trading, but for the long term. And people make changes when they see that they have a big why for making the change. If you don't have a big reason for making changes, you just stay the same. Exactly. So if you just say, I just want to have more money to feel safer, that's probably not enough, because if that was enough, you would already be doing it already. Exactly. And because it's important, well, it was already important before you said that, so you would have been already doing it. So some people I learned this, and you also know this exercise of making a list of benefits and why you need to save money. When you answer, why am I going to save money enough times to make the change, is that when you start making the change. So I have done this before myself. Why am I going to save money? So you make a list and answer this question 50 times, 100 times, 400 times, 1,000 times if necessary, until you start to see that you're making changes in the way you behave with money. You start to learn about it. You start to find ways of putting the money, or places where you can put your money for it to grow instead of to depreciate with inflation. Yeah. So I find hyper important to be very intentional with spending, because we can easily lose money in things that we don't realize. Like when we have coins, we tend to spend those coins easier because they're just coins instead of the notes, the bills, or if we have to do a transfer. So I find that very important. Yeah. Have you found yourself in that situation of being intentional?
Yeah, definitely. And when I did that exercise for the first time, I did it the wrong way. I wrote like benefits. Oh, the benefit of saving is so I can spend it. So as a result, I was spending more rather than actually.
Oh, great point.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's the benefit for you to grow as a person, or or long
Yeah,
term. It's not the benefit of now I can buy a bigger house, a bigger car,
exactly. Yeah.
more shoes. I wanted to mention a book because you talked about seeing yourself as an enterprise and making
Hmm.
profit every month.
Yeah.
So that is a concept that I learned from this book called Motivated Money from
Okay.
Peter Thornhill.
Yeah.
And this is an Australian book, and it was mainly written for Australian people only because it's about the Australian economy. But
Yeah.
it's not only about investing. And he doesn't give suggestions about what to put your money on specifically, what type of shares or
Mhm.
investments. But he talks about the mindset of life and money that he has and that he shares with people. And part of the mindset is seeing yourself as a company all the time. So you said something very important, which is making profit every month. But
Mhm.
also he talks about investing in yourself. That's really important because usually what happens in companies, and when you see yourself as a company, you start to see things different. So for example, the money conversation with your partner, if you're in a company and they're having financial issues, they have meetings to address the issue. So
Yeah.
the same thing we can do at home. Also, investing in yourself. If a company is making more profit, they probably want to then invest in the company, part of that profit, to get an additional line of products, business unit, or manufacturing line to produce more products, to sell more, to earn more.
Yeah.
So, in the same way, we can see ourselves that we can invest in new skills and habits. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money
Mhm.
necessarily because we have a lot of content these days online that is not as expensive as it used to be in the past. So we can think about spending money on ourselves in a way that we can grow ourselves towards our goals and making more money or gaining skills that will help us to get a new position in our job, a new higher position or changing jobs. So investing in ourselves is very
Mhm.
important. He
Yeah.
also talks about how we see ourselves in relation to the share market and the economy.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're making, I don't know, this month or this year, you made 1% or 2% more than the year before in profit, net profit yourself as an individual with a job. How is that in comparison with the economy in the country? Because if the economy is higher, maybe by 10%, well, maybe you didn't do so well as you could have done by investing in shares, for example, or any other investments. But if you earn 1% and the economy only went up by 5 or 0.5%, you did very well.
Yeah.
So he brings this concept of comparing your financial situation with the economy and see how well you could have done. Because if you say you did well or you did bad, which is it's always in relation to something else, you will never know by an absolute number because you need to compare that to something else. Is it better because you now have more income, because you bought something different, because you're doing similar to the economy? I love that concept from that book. So I really recommend Motivated Money. I think he doesn't sell it on Amazon, only on his website, Peter Thornhill, but
Mhm.
it's worth the read and it's not very thick.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Thanks for that.
Do you have any of your preference, any particular books? I have many, but I think this is the top one at the moment for me.
Oh, at the moment, I'm reading the Book of Wealth, which is
Mm-hmm.
quite a thick book.
Mm-hmm.
I love the classic Think and Grow Rich, The Richest Man in Babylon, The Millionaire Next Door from Stanley. Um, yeah, like I found that personal finance, it, it's really about doing the basics and just, you know, especially me, I love, personal growth, personal development. And you're always looking for the next strategy, but in the end, it comes back to basics and universal laws. Those are the things that work rather than all these gimmicks and get rich quick things. So yeah, I really like the basics.
Yeah, it's interesting because we have resolved, so we have now solved so many
Mm-hmm.
mysteries, and we have so much technology. We've been to space. We go and come
Mm-hmm.
back. Now we can go almost weekly if we wanted to.
Yeah.
We have seen what SpaceX has done. We have Nobel Prize winners doing
Mm-hmm.
so much with science and
Yeah.
medicine. But saving is such a
Yeah.
simple thing that many people still don't know how to do. And it's because they don't know how to change habits.
Yeah.
And it's
And
pretty
the,
much
and the
about
thing,
habits.
when I tell people to save, they say, "Oh, I don't have money to save." But actually, you have to save first, and then you live on the rest. It's not like, oh, you wait. Like what you
Yes.
said before, like, if you save $10 and you don't have a purpose for it, you gotta spend it. And one of those purposes can be to save money. So you save it for the gods of saving, and yeah, then you don't spend it. So savings come first, and then you live on the remainder.
Yes. And it has a different meaning for every person because I
Mm-hmm.
know some people don't like to spend. I've heard this from some people that they don't want to spend money on themselves because they feel guilty because they have family, or they could be helping other people instead of spending money on themselves or saving money uh, to put in the share markets and make money themselves. But I don't save money that way anymore. I used to a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but I have found that the more I invest in myself, spend on myself, and reward myself for my efforts, I expand also myself and I'm able to make more and help people more than if I stay small. So have you found this the same yourself?
It depends. Like, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on seminars, and most seminars that are promoted, like, yeah, come here, it's an investment in yourself. But it really depends. Why do you go to the seminar? If you just go to there to have fun, to make connections, because that's important to you, you may not necessarily make money off of it. But if you go to a seminar specifically for an issue you want to solve, yeah, I found it's really beneficial. And and I really like how you label this. Like, rather than spending it on a course, it's an investment in yourself, because who knows what the future results from that course might be. Like, maybe I went to a seminar 10 years ago, and an idea that I learned tomorrow, it will make me tens of thousands of dollars, because now I start to implement it, and it starts to create a return.
Yeah, it could also be in the connections that you make. You can make
Yeah, can be
connections
too.
and
Yeah.
keep in touch with people.
Yeah.
And to me, that goes back to being intentional again. So when you go to do, you're going to do something. So when I teach my course, one that I'm teaching at the moment, I ask people at the beginning, what is your intention? What is your objective? Why do you want to be here, or what do you want to achieve? Because if we don't have an intention, well, things just happen randomly and we don't have a clear outcome of what happens after that. And we don't
Mm-hmm.
know if we achieved what we wanted to achieve. So having a clear intention is very important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have one last tip if people want them.
Oh,
Is
please
to
share.
make sure that you manage your money in multiple currencies. So, for example, I have American dollar, I have British pound, I have Thai baht, I have Australian dollars, I have euros. So during COVID, many governments they printed money, and in those places where the governments printed so much money that it lost value, that currency will go down compared to the other currencies. So if you invest all your money into one currency and it's going down because of what's happening, you can lose a lot of your investments. Like, I had a lot of investments in the US that did really well in the last few months. They went up like 10, 20, 30%. But actually,
Mhm.
the currency went down 15%, so I only made half of the profit. But because I'm invested in multiple countries and multiple currencies, I diversify my risk rather than only relying on that one currency. And it's not just
Mhm.
about money, it's also to have commodities. So I have some Bitcoin, I have some silver, I have some gold. So make sure that you have multiple currencies and multiple commodities. I also have oil, which isn't doing so well. So yeah, that will diversify your risk. It will lower your emotions, and it will create a really stable financial foundation for your future.
Yes, I think this topic of money can be studied. We can study money for ages, and there is always something new
Exactly. Yeah.
to learn and master. But it's worth doing it.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
don't have any more tips from my side. That was all from me. That was the book that I wanted to mention. Is there any other thing that you want to mention before this cuts? Because it's almost the time for this to cut and finish.
no, I think that was all. I thank everyone for watching. If you still have questions, make sure you send them to Alex or to myself, and we're happy to help you guys. Yeah, and where can people find more about you, Alex? How can they contact you?
Well, they can contact me on my Instagram account, which is at Global Alex Perez. And they can also send me check my website, which is alexperez.com.au.
Okay, perfect.
What about you?
Yeah, same thing here on Instagram, bartmilots or bartmilots.com.
Perfect. So, well, thank you for whoever listened here. Thank you, Bar, for your tips and tactics for this year. Let's make sure that we put them into practice. Thank you for your
Absolutely.
time,
Yeah,
and we'll keep in touch.
absolutely. Thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone for watching. Bye for now.
Bye for now.